Well, welcome back to our show. I'm Sean.
I'm Dave.
Oh, and I keep forgetting my coffee mug. We have a special treat here for you. And this whole thing comes about because of what people suggest as people they want to hear. And boy, we got a good one for you here tonight, folks.
We pay big money to get him here, but this is, when we talk about the early days of maritime music, you can't not talk about Razorboy. If you're going to talk about Razorboy, you can't not talk about the Dymburt. We're going to bring him on the show, and he's all the way out in Vancouver, and you're going to see him appear in about 3. There he is, in living color. Lee, how are you?
Just like that. I'm good. How are you guys doing?
How you doing, handsome?
So listen, I told you not to say that in public.
Yeah, that's right. Before we get started, we talked to Ian Stanley earlier. You know Ian.
Yes, I do.
So he said, tell me I'm having a beer in his honor at the Iron Horse Tavern, and you'll know what he's talking about.
Yeah, that's been sort of a long-standing joke between the two of us. I don't even know if either one of us really know what it means, but it's been with us for as long as I can remember, and especially since this fabulous ability is possible, emailing and texting and all of that. So yeah, I love Ian. Always, all of those guys, as I'm sure we'll get into, but yeah, that's awesome.
Let's get right into it, Lee. Let's start at the very beginning. Now, how did you start playing? Did you always want to play guitar?
Okay, so real quick, short and simple background. So you guys may or may not know. So I'm not originally from Halifax or the Maritimes. I was born in Poland and grew up in Montreal. And then by one quirk of fate or another, through a mutual friend, I met Frank McDonald, who was the original drummer for Razorboy. And he quickly convinced me to move to Chatham, New Brunswick, in the Miramichi. So I said goodbye to university and loaded up my stuff on a train and headed to Newcastle, New Brunswick, where he was waiting for me in his GM van. And so I came to the Maritimes through him. And happy to say I never turned back after that. This is the best decision I ever made. And so we had a band together called Hooch at the very beginning, along with our singer Danny Boyle and a bass player, great guy, Richard Shaw. And work wasn't as lucrative as it should be around that area. And as it happened, we ended up getting a keyboard player from St. John's, Newfoundland. And he said, well, I can get you gigs in Newfoundland, no problem. So we packed up and went for what was supposed to be a 2.5-month tour and ended up living there for 2.5 years. Yeah. So, and then when that ended, about the Christmas before 81, so Christmas of 80, Frank and I, when our band was on its last days there, we had mutually agreed that it was done. We came to Halifax, and we wanted to continue playing, and we met up with Hayes and Horseman, which Jackie's mentioned before, and I'm sure a few others. And as luck would have it, he introduced Frank and I to Jackie. And so, as Jackie mentioned in his interview, that's pretty much how Razorboy was born in January or February of 1981. So coming to playing and music, growing up with my brother, he's 5 years older than me, always enamored with music. So there was great stuff on the turntable back when there were turntables. Great stuff on the turntable all the time, whether it was, you know, Jimi Hendrix, Are You Experienced, or whether it was Johnny Winter or the Allman Brothers. And I immediately gravitated to more so Johnny Winter and the Allman Brothers, the bluesy type of side of things. And one day he came home from some high school dance or something, and part of the decorations was a guitar made out of styrofoam cut out. And he brought it home, and I immediately started toying around with it, playing with it, thinking, woohoo, you know, I got a guitar. Of course, it cracked in two in about 30 seconds. But so somehow I immediately got really, really enamored with guitar. And I tried taking a couple of lessons. I'm sure people have had these types of experiences before, where the first thing, excuse me, the first thing they want to do is tell you to start working on scales and stuff. And of course, I wanted to skip right ahead and play all the cool stuff. So after 2 lessons, he gave up on me. But like most people, I just started putting the needle on the record, on and off and on and off and on and off, and slowly but surely started being self-taught, along with, you know, some music instruction from some books and whatever. And it just gradually became so much a part of my DNA that that's all I wanted to do, much like yourselves, you know, because once the bug hits, man, it's tough to get that monkey off your back. And it's a nice monkey to have, but because a lot of people
right under your skin. You can't,
don't
you're trying to scratch it off and
necessarily
it won't
have.
go away.
Well, you know, I mean, it really is, I don't know, it's a real gift to have that ability and that talent and that way to express yourself, because a lot of people don't. People like ourselves sort of take it for granted because, like I say, it becomes part of who you are. So we almost forget that other people don't necessarily understand, or they can't do it, or they'll never learn how to play guitar or drums or sing or whatever that is. But we're very fortunate. So that being the case, like I said, I just kept working at it and working at it. My first guitar was like an Ibanez copy of a Maserite guitar. If you know what they're kind of like, it looks sort of like a weird reverse Strat where the bottom horn is longer than the top horn. If you ever Google them, you'll see what I mean. But back then, I think Ibanez made some brilliant copies before they even started making their own brand of guitars that everybody, and like Steve Vai and others, made popular. But back then, if you had a copy of a Les Paul or an SG or, you know, a Maserite by Ibanez, that wasn't so bad. Right. I got lucky and found a Fender Bandmaster back then, which, yes, I know what you're thinking. Does he still have it?
Exactly.
No. Moron. Big M right there. Moron. Because as we all know, those things are all but, you know, they're unicorns when you find them now. So I was lucky enough to get one of those. And I was still living in Montreal at the time. And I used to go down to Steve's Music Store on Craig Street before it turned to Saint Antoine when everything went French. And I used to go by all of the stores, because there was a whack of pawn shops before you got to Steve's Music Store. And I would just drool over all the guitars, and I desperately wanted a Les Paul. I remember because I was very much into Jethro Tull, and on their third album, there was a picture of Martin Barre on the back with a gold top. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have one of those? But they were all ridiculously out of reach, even the copies. And one day, without babbling on too much, one day, as luck would have it, I'm looking through the newspaper in the classifieds, and lo and behold, somebody's selling a Les Paul, a Gibson Les Paul special. And I was like maybe 16, 17. So I called, and I got my brother who could drive. We went to see this. And it's so typical in Montreal, French-Canadian dad bought his son a Marshall Stack and a Gibson Les Paul. And kid wasn't even remotely interested. And so, disclaimer, I'm Jewish. So, so you'll know where
I was going to go there.
You'll know where I'm going with this. So we decided beforehand. Here's the kicker too, is that they were asking, hold on to your bloomers, they were asking for $200 for this Les Paul. And so it's a Gibson Les Paul special. If you've ever seen them, or you ever saw mine, which I actually still have here in the corner. I'm not going to twist the thing, but it's a flat top and sort of, if I may say on here, it's called a TV special because it had this very kind of yellowish finish. I used to call it yellow, but I'm not going to say that here. And so they wanted $200 for it. And I was like, this can't be the real thing. I mean, I at least knew enough about them to say, can't be. So we show up, and sure enough, it's the real McCoy. And before we came in, getting back to what I was saying, I said, all right, I'll put $100 in one pocket, and then I'll have two 20s in another, and then maybe a 10. You keep a 10 and a 5 in your pocket. And so I went in there and looked at it, and I said, well, geez, it's an awful old guitar. It's going to need a lot of work, right? So, and I can say this because I'm Jewish. I was trying to Jew him down, right? So I said, will you take 150? And the guy said, oh, I don't know, So, of course, I reach into my pocket and I take out a 10, and then, will you take 160? And then I said to my brother, do you have any money on you? And he pulls out a 5. I said, that's all we got, right? Lying, of course. And he said, yeah, what the hell? Take it for $165 with the original case. So now not too long after I sent the serial number to Norlin, which came after Gibson, and turns out this is a 1956 Les Paul special, and for $165. And so, I never looked back from there. I got really, really, really lucky. And so that was a guitar that I played for years, and I still pick it up. And I got lucky also in Montreal and picked up my very first Mesa Boogie 112 combo. Eventually I bought a second one, which I still have, and that one is serial number 112. So those are the ones before anybody even said a Mach 1 or a Mach 2. That was...
Is that a tube amp or is that solid state?
Oh, that's a tube amp all the way. Yeah, that thing is... That's just to give you some sense. Keith Richards has one from that first run, was only 2,000 of them. I think Keith Richards is number 700 and something. So the only people that I know, of course, everybody knows, Carlos Santana is the guy who really brought those to life. And he has some really early ones, but this is from that very first run. And so I, again, just lucky, got some really nice gear real early. And I played that boogie with Razorboy from beginning to end for the whole 8 years that the band was together, as you knew it back then. So, yeah, that's and then eventually people probably saw me with, probably in the mid to late 80s. I had a Charvel that I played a lot, this red Charvel, which became my main guitar, along with that gear. And that guitar steadied me very, very well for many, many years, and became quite the signature for me, certainly playing in Razorboy. So that's the history.
I get a two-parter here for you, Lee. And first
Sure.
off, I'm going to say, when my mortgage renewal comes up, I'm giving you a call.
Well, I'll tell you something.
I got 3 pockets.
So we had Jack on. Jack paid you a wicked compliment in that he said that, so I'm going to make 2 things here. You're going to go, just bear with me. So he paid you a wicked compliment, and he said every time he got on stage with you, he was nervous because you were an amazing singer. And I do remember your voice. And I remember actually a tune that my band was doing. I couldn't figure out the harmony. I remember it was She Don't Know Me by Bon Jovi. I remember the part you were singing. I actually figured out the harmony by listening to you guys play live.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing I remember is, and I'm a drummer, but you were one of the first guys that I saw playing back in the day that kind of used to do that country chicken picking thing where you used to use your finger as well as your pick. And I remember being fascinated with that. And you said you're self-taught. So was country music something that you got into?
All right. So first of all, I don't think I need to tell people. I love Jackie Smith to death, right? I mean, we've remained close and brothers ever since. So we can talk about that and the rest of the guys in the band in a minute. But and his compliments about my singing, well, I was loud, I'll give him that. But with regards to, I really don't know what to say to your question, because
well, I'll put it another way. Did you do this when you were learning? Maybe it was easier to do that, or is it just something like?
Okay.
I just remember time. I don't remember many guitar players that were rock players doing that.
Okay, so here's the first short answer. In some ways, I wish I'd never ever done that. Only because, yeah, I see you're squinting over there, Dave. Because because I was a huge Johnny Winter fan, and if you're not familiar, Johnny played with a thumb pick, right? So that's what I decided to do. And as a result, of course, you typically end up using your other fingers because it's not really natural to hold the thumb pick like you would a normal pick, because you don't have to, sort of thing. So in some ways, it became a great tool, but in another way, it stopped me from learning how to do alternate picking really effectively, because I got so used to using the fingers as well. So, and again, there's lots of guys who can do that and really make it happen. So what I found for myself is that there were some licks I could play those till the cows come home because of that hybrid technique. But then there were other things that, like for instance, getting into the John Sykes era, where it's full out like fast alternate picking, tremolo picking and stuff. And so when your muscle memory has been one thing, and then you need to try to get it to do something else, it's not as easy to do that after X amount of years, because the muscle memory becomes what it is. So go ahead.
Oh no, we're listening. We're fascinated. Keep going, please. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, because everybody knows I definitely can chat. And for those of you who have never seen me smile, this is what it looks like. A lot of people used to take a lot. I used to take a lot of grief for that. Everybody thought I was this real arrogant, mean guy. And I'll tell everybody here right now, for the record, I guess today they call it resting bitch face, but the reality is that it's just not natural for me to have that grin on my face, unless I'm talking to guys like you. But it wasn't because I was antisocial or any of that. It's just, that's just the way my face happened to be when it was resting. So I apologize to anybody who thought I was a prick, but I'm here to tell you I'm a really nice guy. I really am.
That's awesome you said that. That's funny you say that, Lee. That's funny you say that, because I thought back in the day, I mean, Sean and I we're probably a little bit, like the next generation of bands after you folks. And always could talk to Jackie, always could talk to Steve, always could talk to Tim, always talk to Irvin. He's just unapproachable. That's the impression you got. It's like, I never knew why, but later on, through Facebook, I mean, every single time, like I said, if I see a video that you put on, there's like, yeah, I really miss Lee's playing. He was so bought up, and right away you're like, thanks so much, Dave. He's like, oh, he's really nice. I didn't know. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, you know what? And like I said, I really apologize, but I think, and people do this for different reasons, and they have different ways of doing it. But I honestly think that for me, it was a defense mechanism too, because believe it or not, I was sort of not necessarily introverted in the true sense, but I wasn't a great social creature, unless, of course, I was with a group of people that I felt really comfortable with. So when I was thrown into people that I wasn't familiar with, that's sort of how I dealt with it. And that also comes too, by the way, thankfully on this screen, you can't tell how short I am, but I'm sitting on many. But that's the other thing, right? Like when you think about all the guys in the band, I mean, I was always the shortest guy in the band, and that may not seem like much, but when you're trying to present yourself as some big deal rock band, stature has a lot to do with it, right? So you got to make up for it, right? So I would make up for it by trying to be a decent guitar player and sing loud and do whatever I could.
How about the flying drop kicks?
It wasn't comfortable for me.
Let's talk about the flying drop kicks, or the blue.
You know what?
Would be playing, and suddenly that would be it. It's like, where did that come from? I mean, it was so much fun to watch.
Yeah, well, again, so now we're getting into the whole stage persona, and this, like it was the most lucky and fortunate thing that Jack and I met when we did, because our band was done and his band was done, and off we went. But every incarnation of the band. Like every guy that was in the band, I thought, was a stellar player. And every time somebody moved on and somebody else came along, it really kicked my ass, because I personally believe all of the players that have gone through that band, and certainly once we hit the phase where Ron Hustis joined the band and we had a keyboard player. We had one early on, Mike Boyer from St. John, New Brunswick, but that was very short-lived. I don't think it was his thing to do the kind of music we were headed for. But when we were fortunate enough to get Ron Hustis as Tequila and what was the other band called? I forget now. But when we got him in the band, as well as Dan Levine, the sound man, it really forced me to become way, way better, if it was possible, as far as technique, as far as timing, just because all of these people really, really push you. They really motivate you to be as good as you can possibly be. And just for a second, like to say, like you take somebody like Larry Hall, who I think is just a phenomenal guitar player. And he was one of those guys that automatically your eyes went to, I don't know who else is playing, but I'm watching Larry Hall. That's, so, but my point being is, we were never that kind of a band. Like, it literally was a band. Like, everybody was just as important as the next guy. And we all pushed each other really hard. Like, nobody had a big head. Nobody thought they were better than the next guy. We were only as good as the whole was. And even when I watch some of those videos, that's what I see. I mean, and regardless of how good the band was, it all came down to Jackie. I really don't think, and it proved itself afterwards when Chad became singer for a while, and then we basically changed the name to Acacia. But in all of those incarnations, didn't matter how good the players were, didn't matter whether it was Ron Hustis or Guy Turner or Steve Hennessy and Irv Hennessy and Tim Hewlett and Rob Smith and Chris Cromwell, on and on and on. I don't think any of those people would have showed up to see the band had it not been for Jackie Smith. Now, I know Jackie doesn't consider himself a great singer, and he can try to convince himself of whatever he wants. But the reality is, definitely as an entertainer, that's why people came to see the band. And they came to see it because ultimately he was such a giving guy. He so loved to be on that stage, and he made people feel welcome all the time. And he is like the nicest, as you know, he's the nicest guy on the planet. And as a result, without patting myself or speaking for others, I think he attracted musicians that happily were not only talented, but they were super, super nice guys. Well, except for my crabby face. But he just, honestly, you call a spade. I really don't think people would have come running had it not been Jackie. And I was so fortunate and thrilled to be there with him from day one right to when, it went away. So that's a journey that I wouldn't trade for the world. We had some of the best times on stage. And I'm sure you guys were the same way, is that that's all we did. That's all we did, 24/7. There was no day job. There was no B plan. There was nothing. It was just, and we were lucky, as Jack and others have said. It was a time when there was a lot of work and a lot of bars, and we literally played 48 weeks out of the year. And that's only because I forced the guys to take 2 weeks off for summer and 2 weeks off at Christmas so I could go home to Montreal and visit my mom. But otherwise, it was nonstop. And when we weren't playing, we were hanging out together all the time, or we would be on the phone with each other all the time going, you got to listen to this and you got to try that. And again, it's, yeah. So there you said previously, Dave.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I said, it's so funny because we're running out of time. So this is a given that we're bringing you back again, Lee, because, I mean, right now, Sean and I are just awestruck. Like, we've been schooled this whole time from the caliber of musicians that we've been talking to on this show. And it's just, it was the era that we missed, the early 80s to the mid 80s when we first started. But you're so right. And it was that way with Sean and I, too. It wasn't just your guy in the band. It was your best friend. And that's all you did. You hung around with them constantly, whether you're home or on the road, on stage.
100%. And if Jack hadn't already told you, so when we lived on Faulkner Street, when guys would join the band, like, if people don't know, Irvin Hennessy, Steve Hennessy, they lived at his house, right? This is the guy, this is what Jackie Smith was like. He and his grandmother, the woman that raised him. So it's that kind of thing that made all the bands the way they were back then, because everybody truly believed it could happen for them too. When I first arrived, I just was so enamored with like Oakley and Minglewood, and I used to look up to those guys, and George Antoniak, like, what a brilliant guitar player, and Richie, what a brilliant guitar player, and Dutchie Mason. And I was very, very fortunate to actually get invited up and play with all of those people who I idolized. And then, like so many, you realize just really nice guys, and you find common ground because, of course, music is your language, along with a couple of wobbly pops. All of a sudden, people loosen their tongues and stories start to fly. But it really, really was an incredible, incredible time. One thing I wanted to mention that I don't know that anybody else has mentioned is that, and probably more so then than now, and I know we're getting close to the end of this, is that cover bands, and I'll use this as an example. So everybody knows who Eddie Van Halen is, right? So, but nobody knows what Eddie Van Halen did before we all got to know who he is. And then he just plays the way he plays on everything, you know, whether it's Van Halen or whether it's on Michael Jackson's Beat It, that's what you got, right? But with us, all of our bands, we had to be chameleons. So, for instance, like for me, you know, it's not that easy going from playing, you know, guitar parts for like Bon Jovi, and all of a sudden now you need to play like John Sykes from Whitesnake, and now you need to play. So that's a real amazing education, like that a lot of people don't spotlight enough, because people tend to go poo-poo on cover bands. But when, like the bands did, at least back then, they made it their business to try to play those things as close as possible to the original. And it's bad enough when you pick a style that everybody can automatically do, but when they're all over the road, when you're doing, you know, like Queensryche, and you're doing Guns N' Roses, and you're doing Jovi and Whitesnake, and you're doing, you know, AC/DC, and you're like, it's a bear. I mean, we had to do this 24/7. You needed all that time to learn that stuff, right? It doesn't just come naturally. It takes a lot of work, right? At least it did for me.
Hey, and you know what? And I know we're getting, I don't know how much time we have, but like Dave said, we're definitely having you back, because I mean, for Dave and I, you guys were, I mean, I remember hearing about you guys when I was in high school, and I got into the Crazy Horse Society when I was 17 years old. And you know, you guys for me were that band that we're always like, man, they got the lights, they got this, they get that. But the one thing about Razorboy that I always loved, and I'm a really simple guy. I go to a restaurant, I want chicken fingers and fries. I go to McDonald's, I want the big. You guys were, if I saw you at JB's or I saw you at the Crazy Horse, it was the same show. It was consistent. It was awesome. And it was never, you guys never mailed it in. And that's what I always loved about Razorboy.
Again, and I know it's ticking down, but that's all Jackie Smith, right? That's just,
That's
bigger
not
was
true,
better.
Lee. That's not true. That's not true. Jackie Smith, I agree, you know, was the pinnacle, the focus point, but it was the whole band. The experience was consistent. That's what Sean's saying. So you don't do poo-poo on yourself, Lee Dymburt, because you were awesome.
No. So I'm not
I
just
know Jackie's awesome.
nice, I'm also humble. Yeah, but again, as so many have said, it was a very different time, and very, very fortunate for so many of us. And but yeah, it was a great education to go through all of that, and with all of those people. And your comment, by the way, Sean, about the lights and all of that, that's Randy Urquhart. I mean, that guy just wouldn't take no for an answer, right? And that's why I post some of those videos for sure, because that was unheard of.
All right, we got to stop right there. I want to promise me you're going to come back.
I promise. I got nowhere to go.
All right, we thank you so much for being on, Lee.
Thank you.
See you next time, brother.
You bet. Take good care of yourselves, guys. Appreciate it.
We'll be talking to you really
Thank you.
soon. All right.
You bet.